So for task 2, boss wants us to check to see if the invoice copy table exists, and if it does exist, we need to delete it. And if a temporary table called customers exists, and if that exists, we need to delete it. So we are going to check to see if the object ID is not null. And this is very common for scripting. So if we check object ID invoice copy to see if it is not null, okay, so if it's not null, that means there's something there, then we're going to do a drop table. And we're going to do the same thing for customers, but remember this is a global temporary table, so we have to prefix it with the location, and it should be in temp DB. Okay, so if that is not null, then we're going to drop it. So we'll go ahead and execute. Okay. And if we didn't do the check and we just did the drop table, we do run the risk of having errors. So our boss would like us now to see if a product table exists in the AP database or the Northwind database. And if the table does exist, they would like a count of the number of products in the table. So we're going to have to see if products exist. We'll have to first check AP, and if it does, then we'll print a little message saying that it exists, and we'll do a little count with a select. Okay, if it doesn't exist, we will also display a little message. So let's move our closing comment down. So we're going to use AP. We're checking products to see if it's there. And if it's true, we actually want to do more than one thing. So if you want to do more than one thing, you have to use begin. And that, if you're used to traditional programming, that's kind of the equivalent of a curly brace, okay? And then you have your statements that you want to execute, and then you tell it to end, which is the equivalent of the closing curly brace, okay? And then we have an else statement where we're only telling it to do one thing, which is a print statement, so we don't have to worry about begin and end. Okay, so we're going to go ahead, and I'm fairly certain it does not exist because I can see the squiggle, but we will go ahead and no, that does not exist. Okay, so I'm going to pull this down, and we're basically going to do the same exact thing for Northwind. So we're going to tell it to use Northwind. Still checking for products. If it's there, then we're going to do a little message that it exists and do a little count. And if it's not there, we're going to print the other message. Okay, and it does exist, and there are 77 products. So let's move our closing brace down, or our closing comment down. And our next little scenario is we just learned about how to do loops, and we decided we needed a little practice. So loops are often used with counter variables. So let's say you want to go through something or a section of code 10 times, okay? You usually would use a counter to keep track of how many times you've gone through this one section of code. So we're going to declare a couple of variables. One is a total, and the other one we're going to be using as a counter. Okay, so Here are the variables we're declaring. Total, which is going to be the result of what we're doing in the loop. And then number, which is what we're going to use to keep track of how many times we've actually gone through the loop. So we have a while loop, and we're going to stay in the loop as long as the number is less than or equal to 10. Number starts at 1. Now, you'll notice immediately this is a little different than a traditional while loop, because in traditional programming, you have parentheses, and here you do not. Okay. Also, in place of the opening and closing curly, we have begin and end. Okay. And then we've got set total equal to total plus the number, and set the number equal to the number plus 1. So basically, as we're going through the loop, it's adding the number into the total, and each time it's increasing the number by 1. So once it is equal to 10, it's going to fall out of the loop, and we're just going to print out the total. Okay, so first time through, the number is 1. The total is 0. So it's going to say 0 plus 1. It puts a 1 into the total. We add 1 to our number, so now our number is 2. Is 2 less than 10? Yes. So now we take 1 plus 2, which is 3. And we've got 2 plus 1, which is 3. We'll go back up here. 3 is less than 10. And you can see it just keeps going until it's done. And then we're going to see the grand total. Okay, so 55 was the total of adding all of those numbers. And we're going to move our closing comment down. So our scenario here is our boss would like us to display the order ID, product ID, and total price, which is the unit price times the quantity for Northwind data in the order details table. They would like to see information for the 10 highest total price orders. So we are going to have to code this using a row cursor, a while loop, and an if statement. So I'm going to go ahead and code this up, and then we're going to talk about what it's doing. All right, so I've keyed all of this in, and we're working with a row cursor. Anytime you don't want to process all of the rows in a result set, you can create a row cursor, and then you can process some of the rows instead of viewing all of the rows. So we've declared a counter, and the counter is going to keep track of how many rows we have processed. And we've got our select here, and normally running this select is going to give us multiple rows. Okay, but because we don't want to see everything, we've attached a row cursor. So we say declare row cursor is a cursor for. It's a cursor for the result set of this select. Okay, this select could have 100 rows, 200, 300 rows, and we have sorted it by price in descending order. So the top prices are going to be at the beginning of the result set. So all we want to see are 10 of those. So that is why we have our row cursor. So once you have created the row cursor and connected it to a result set, you have to open it. And then you are going to use the fetch next from row cursor command, which is going to give you the very first row in that result set. Okay, and then we get into our little while loop here. So while fetch status is 0, which means it is successful. it retrieved a row. Okay, so while it's retrieving a row, then we have a fetch next, and we are setting our counter to the existing counter, which was 1, adding 1 to it. If the counter is greater than or equal to 10, we're done. So we break out of all of this. Otherwise, we continue, which is going to take us back up here to the top of the while loop. Okay, so we did a fetch next. We got into the while loop. We did another fetch next. We incremented our counter. We checked it, came up, checked the fetch status from this fetch. Okay, so there was something there. We did another fetch. We increased the counter. We check it. We go back up. We keep doing this. And while we're doing this, it is displaying rows. Okay, because what it's fetching is the row from our select. Okay, so it is going to be displaying that select data as it is processing these rows. Once we get to 10, the counter is going to equal 10, so it's going to break out of all of this. We're done with the row cursor, so it's closing it up and it's deallocating the resources. So we're going to go ahead and execute this. Okay, and if you count, there should be 10 of these. Hopefully. Unless there weren't 10 in the result set. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and comment that out. But again, you're going to use a row cursor if you don't want to process everything in the result set. Okay, you only want to process a certain number of rows. So our next little scenario is our boss wants us to create a script to back up the master database file. We're going to place the file into a temp folder that should be on our C drive. So before running the code, you're going to want to check your C drive to make sure there is a folder on it called temp. And if the folder isn't there, you do need to create the folder. So it'd be a little scary looking at my C drive here. Okay. So looking at my C drive, I do have a temp folder. Okay. So I can go ahead and put backups in there. Mine is all lowercase, which is something that you are going to want to pay attention to. And so we are going to have to declare quite a few variables. We're going to have to declare a name for our database. So we'll say declare at name, and this will be varchar 50. And this is going to be our database name. And let me see. And we're also going to do a path. And this is a path on the hard drive for the backup file. And that is going to be a little bigger. We'll make it 256. And we'll put a little comment in, path, backup file. And then, of course, we have to have a file name. And we'll make this large here too. File name for backup. And then we'll also do a file date. And we'll make that 20. And we're going to put the date in the file name. Because conceivably, we may have run this multiple times and get multiple backups. So we're going to set the path first. And that should be C:\/ and temp. Now, if you spell temp with capitals, you're going to want to match your casing on this. And then we'll go ahead and set our file date. So basically what we're going to do is use the getDate function and convert that into character. So we're going to say convert to varchar 20. And what we're converting is getDate. And we'll use style 112. So if you're wondering about this whole style thing, okay, there's a lot of places online where you can go and find out what these values are. But you can see if you're using date time, these are the different values you can give. We chose 112, which is going to give us century, year, month, and day. And earlier, when we were doing other conversions, converting money to character, we used a 1, and that's where I got that value from. So we'll move that out of our way as we continue writing our script. Okay, so we've set the file date. And yep, and mine is flagged because I have an extra I. Okay, so at this point, we are going to declare a little cursor for a select on name. So I'm going to actually pause this while I key the rest in, and then we'll talk about it. All right, so I have finished keying everything in, and I've declared a database cursor for. I'm selecting the name from the sys databases, and we've looked at some of these commands in the past. And I don't want to back up master model, MSDB, or temp. So you can see where those are. So basically, it's going to go through and back up everything else. And I have all of your databases in here. So when I run this, it's going to take a long time. Okay, because it's going to back up every one of these to C and temp, okay, that temp folder. So basically, I'm going to open the cursor, and I'm going to fetch the first row, which probably will end up being this one. That'll be in name, and as long as it was successful, it retrieves something, it's going to set the file name to the path plus the name. So the path is C:temp. The name will probably be AdventureWorks for the first one. It's going to do an underscore. It's going to do the date and add VAK to the end. And then it's actually going to write that file to disk. And that's what this is basically doing. It's doing a backup to disk to the location that I specified, and then it's grabbing the next name, which will probably be AP. So this is going to take a super long time once I start. So obviously I'm going to pause the video, and then when it's done, we'll take a look and see what's in C and temp. Okay, and it is going to take a while. You'll notice that there is a cancel here, and it is working, executing this query. The more database files and tables and data you have, the longer it will take. So I'm going to pause until it's done. All right, that actually wasn't too bad. So you can see what it processed in here and the order it processed everything. And so you can actually tell just by looking at this what database files that it processed. But if we want to take a look, let me pull this over here. And we'll open up temp. And then you can see everything that it backed up. So pretty much everything that I had in my database. So I'm going to comment all of that out. And the next video is going to talk about try-catch blocks.